Hi, everyone. Jeremy Plonk from ExpressBet and FirstBet, and welcome into the It's Official podcast. Each week, we take on 5 hot topics in horse racing within the next 30 minutes or so. It's a big week. It's opening weekend, Fall Stars weekend, if you will, at Keeneland. We've got Breeders' Cup major prep days coming up at Santa Anita, as well as Belmont at Aqueduct this weekend. And some of those same venues were in play last week with some of the races we're about to review. As we do in each and every week here on the podcast, we're going to start things off with Jeff Siegel's Goosebump Award. This is the horse each week who gets us most excited for what we saw on the racetrack, got us up out of our chair cheering and the hair on our arms standing up, in fact. Imagination lived up to his name in the Santa Anita Sprint. I didn't see this coming. Many didn't, but he couldn't have won more impressively.
And it is the sprint champion, Straight No Chaser, who passes the 3/8 pole in front by a length over Awesome Rhythm, heading to the quarter pole. Down at the rail, Dr. Venkman is hard ridden. Wound Up is next. Imagination, widest of all, has 4 to make up, and he'll have to go 4 wide too. Smooth Cruisin', Speedboat Beach, top of the stretch, and Straight No Chaser sprints for home. Dr. Venkman takes up the chase. Imagination in the center of the racetrack, 1 furlong left. Straight No Chaser. Here comes Imagination. Imagination's just cruising up to him, and he's cruising on by. Imagination, absolutely electrifying performance as he wins the Santa Anita Sprint Championship.
Not only did he run down last year's Breeders' Cup Sprint winner and champion sprinter Straight No Chaser, he did it with the ease that you see maybe in a route race, but not a 6 furlong grade 2 sprint that had grade 1 runners in it. Just an absolute hand ride and a hammerlock almost. Impressive performance by Imagination under Juan Hernandez for trainer Bob Baffert. This horse had not run in a sprint race successfully in 3 tries in his career. He's yet to win in grade 1 company, being 0 for 4 in those type races. And Imagination hadn't run since routing back in January. He turns back, he trains up to the race, and he runs an absolute cracker in the Santa Anita Sprint Championship. It's our Goosebump Award winner for this week, an impressive performance that won't be matched by anything that we saw in the past 7 days. Now, this is $1 million buy who was expected to be a good runner. He won the San Felipe as a grade 2 back in 2024, but didn't develop. He's only 2 for 12 coming into this race. Might he find a better path here as a sprinter, like Secret Circle did for Bob Baffert? You remember Baffert put Secret Circle on the Oaklawn path to the Triple Crown to see how he may turn out in terms of a router. He ended up turning back and being an excellent sprinter. Midnight Loot, another Baffert runner who was able to run successfully sprinting after going long earlier in the career. Imagination may fit into that mold, and he may fit into favoritism now for the Breeders' Cup Sprint. You think about Straight No Chaser. He hasn't been the same horse since running in Saudi Arabia in the spring. He's had back-to-back disappointing efforts. Bookham Dano, the horse who's dominated the East Coast sprint races this year, his connection said this past week they are bypassing the Breeders' Cup Sprint and saving up for a 5-year-old season next year for Bookham Dano. So without Bookham Dano, with Straight No Chaser kind of sliding right now, Imagination could be the favorite for the Breeders' Cup Sprint. He is amongst the choices. He's 10 to 1 according to Odds Checker, the international anti-post futures betting markets in Europe. Nisos at 7 to 1. Not expected, I don't think, for the sprint, but Ben Tornado, the favorite right now for the Breeders' Cup Sprint in the international markets at 4 to 1. Of course, he was second last year and coming off a big win last time out. Ben Tornado could be favored, but you're talking about lesser-known connections than a Bob Baffert charge, and I think Imagination towards the Breeders' Cup Sprint is obviously going to be one we have to watch. The Breeders' Cup Sprint for this one, Imagination. Baffert also won the Goodwood and the Zenyatta last week, as well as this Santa Anita Sprint that you just saw. So a massive weekend for him leading into the Breeders' Cup, and he had the performance of the week with Imagination. Let's go to our second topic this week on the big board, and look, we scoff at Kentucky Derby winners and how they haven't done much after the Derby in recent years. Well, not only is 2024 Kentucky Derby winner Mystic Dan in the news this week, he's back in the winner's circle after the Lucas Classic, but also the 25 Derby winner Sovereignty also had his form shined up a little bit again this week. Let's talk first about Mystic Dan in the Lucas Classic. He was a 3/4 length winner in that race at Churchill Downs with plenty of traffic trouble. 37-1 over the final 3 furlongs for Mystic Dan. He was impressive coming up the inside at a track that we know he loves. The Lucas Classic now sets him up for the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile.
fifth off the turn. At the top of the stretch, Disarm powers up to grab the lead. Banishing trying to hang tough. Mystic Dan in so tight. Bounced around but still trying. Hit Show coming down the center. Disarm in front. Mystic Dan shakes loose. Here comes Mystic Dan once again up the rail, and once again a winner at Churchill. Mystic Dan overcomes some trouble in this stretch to beat Disarm on the wire.
Mystic Dan, the 4-year-old, now in great form at Churchill Downs this year. He won the Blame earlier. Of course, 4 of 6 lifetime at Churchill Downs over that dirt. He also did win at Oaklawn in the mud, if you remember back in the day when he won the Southwest Stakes as a 3-year-old in the mud. But he's 1 for 10 outside of Churchill Downs. So will he head to Del Mar with success? We shall see in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. Trainer Kenny McPeak says that race may fit his stud potential better. We know he's already won at 1.25 miles, of course, with the Kentucky Derby. I think that's a little bit of gamesmanship that they're doing it for stud value. They're obviously looking for an easier spot than taking on the heavyweights in the Breeders' Cup Classic division. But Mystic Dan, a horse who right now is listed at 16-1 in the anti-post odds for the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. Horses like Locked, who won the Woodward over the weekend, right now is a slight co-favorite at 6-1. So Locked won the Woodward last week. He's favored to the Dirt Mile, but Mystic Dan has earned his way there, and he's earned $4.8 million lifetime. We cry and bemoan all the time that Kentucky Derby winners don't come back at 4 and they don't run well in the future. Mystic Dan is bucking some of that. Again, he was just 1 for 8 since the Kentucky Derby, though, before he won this race in the Lucas Classic. So he hasn't been a win machine, but he's been solid enough. The campaign was rough for him over the winter when he vanned from Fairgrounds out to the Malibu Stakes on December 26th at Churchill when they couldn't get a flight. I think that threw him off. The Pegasus World Cup then was back quickly after that. I think the travel situation in the winter really screwed up his campaign. He's been pretty darn good, though, since about early April when he got back on the beam. Derby Day, I think it was, in fact, at Churchill Downs when he ran at Oaklawn under Arietta and ran a really good race there. He's been pretty darn solid this summer. So Mystic Dan, it's good to see him back, and he definitely shined up his form this past week. The other Derby winner that we're talking about in this segment is Sovereignty. He didn't run. He's just training right now and getting ready for his favorite's role in the Breeders' Cup Classic. But once again, another 3-year-old this past weekend made his form look outstanding. That was Bracket Buster. In Sunday, he was favored in the Oklahoma Derby, coming off a 10-length runner-up in the Travers Stakes. We already saw the Travers third-place finisher, who was another 10-plus back behind Bracket Buster, that being Magnitude. He came back and ran second in the Pennsylvania Derby. And, of course, the Pennsylvania Derby was won by Baeza, a horse who chased unsuccessfully a couple times against Sovereignty earlier this year. So the form of Sovereignty backed up certainly by the 1-2 finishers in the Pennsylvania Derby, and backed up once again at Remington Park this weekend in the Oklahoma Derby.
Midway through the turn, Mr. Omaha still there. Bracket Buster up alongside now, 1/4 mile to go in the Oklahoma Derby. 3 that back to third, and Iron Dome, top of the stretch. Bracket Buster swings off best and grabs the lead away from Mr. Omaha. Mr. Omaha back to second, furlong to go. Iron Dome third, and then Publisher a distant fourth. Bracket Buster was just biding his time for the first part of this race, waiting for the second turn, and now pouring it on. Bracket Buster to take the Oklahoma Derby and do it easily by 4.
Bracket Buster, maybe not a Breeders' Cup horse. Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile has been a spot for horses out of the Oklahoma Derby in past years, so even some successful winners on Breeders' Cup Day out of that race. I don't know that he goes to the Breeders' Cup. Trainer Vicky Oliver certainly supporting heavily the Kentucky program. I wouldn't be shocked to see this one headed towards the Clark Handicap the day after Thanksgiving and take on older horses there. But Bracket Buster's had a really nice year and is a 3-year-old who's on that second cusp. But he's kind of at the top of the second cusp. You can look at him in the same breath with the Gosgers of the world and some of the others that we've seen. But it's certainly a big 1, 2, 3 in the 3-year-old division. We know that. And then we got a 4th member of the 3-year-old division who kind of announced he's in that cusp as well, that being Nevada Beach. Nevada Beach for Baffert, upsetting Full Serrano, the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile winner in the Goodwood Stakes this past week at Santa Anita. So that second division of the 3-year-olds had a good weekend with Bracket Buster, with Nevada Beach, but certainly the big 1, 2, 3 in the 3-year-old division, it's Sovereignty, a big gap back to Journalism, and another small gap, I think, to Baeza. You could argue Baeza and Journalism in the 2-3 spot, but there's certainly 1, 2, 3. Now, as for the Breeders' Cup Classic, here are the odds from oddschecker.com and how they shake out right now of the major players for this year's Breeders' Cup Classic. Sovereignty, a huge favorite in the early wagering, in the advanced wagering, I should say, the futures wagering in the international markets, a 7-4 favorite. Less than 2-1 odds, more like 9-5 if you would see on a U.S. tote board. Sierra Leone, second choice, defending champion in the Breeders' Cup Classic at 5-1. Fierceness coming off his win in the Pacific Classic, next up at 8. Forever Young is amongst the group at 12-1. You see him pictured on the right. We focus on Forever Young because he's about 24 hours away from his first or his last major prep for the Breeders' Cup. We're going to see him run at Funabashi Racecourse in Japan. Same prep race he used last year before coming over for the Breeders' Cup. He's not raced since running third in the Dubai World Cup, but we are just hours away from Forever Young coming back to the races and probably punching his ticket back to the Breeders' Cup Classic. Of course, he was third in the Classic last year, third in the Kentucky Derby, 8 for 11 lifetime. And again, coming off a third in the Dubai World Cup. Earlier this year, he won the Saudi Cup. Forever Young in action coming up. He's really the last of the major players to prep for this year's Breeders' Cup Classic. Journalism holding at 12-1 in the international markets. Baeza slightly behind him at 14. And we throw Nevada Beach in there, coming off that win in the Goodwood, so you can see what the thought process with the international bookmakers are, that Nevada Beach is a serious cut below the top 3-year-olds in there at that 12-14-1 range. Nevada Beach being offered right now at 25-1. Those prices as of this morning on Tuesday, September 30th, according to oddschecker.com. Let's move on here on the podcast. We go from the Classic division to talk about a horse we're very familiar with. In the Breeders' Cup Turf, the 2 of the last 3 years, the winner has been Rebels Romance. He could go for a potential third Breeders' Cup win coming up in a couple weeks at Del Mar. He won it last year. He won it 2 years ago. Only 3 horses have won Breeders' Cup races, or 2 horses, I should say, have won 3 Breeders' Cup divisions over the years, that being Beholder, a 3-time Breeders' Cup winner, and then the other 3-time winner, Goldakova, winning the mile in all 3 of her appearances in the Breeders' Cup mile, or actually in 3 of her 4 appearances in the Breeders' Cup mile. So can Rebels Romance join that kind of company and age 7 win a Breeders' Cup race for the 3rd time? Well, according to the old Billy Idol song, in the midnight hour, you want more, more, more. The Rebel yell from Rebels Romance, the way he looked this past weekend, he seems to want more, more, more. He's won 5 of 7 this year, including the Joe Hirsch Turf Classic this past weekend at Aqueduct.
Red is about to cut loose from the back end of the field. Rebels Romance is now sprinting for home. Rebels Romance is trying to opening up and just is doing that. It's Rebels Romance who's clear. El Cordobas redistricting far bridge. But look at Rebels Romance just opening up on this grade 1 field. Has a 16th left to go. No doubt it's going to be Rebels Romance dominant in the grade 1 Joe Hirsch Turf Classic. Rebels Romance wins it easily, redistricting second, then come El Cordobas and Far Bridge. 2 minutes, 25.72. Give it to Rebels Romance.
He just looked like he was having fun in the gallop out, bouncing around, ears up. Couldn't have done it any easier as the 3-5 favorite. He won by 3.5 lengths. He went right to the front in that race, not necessarily his typical running style that we've seen in his U.S. races, but he just controlled it throughout. He beat El Cordobas. He beat Far Bridge, a very good cast of New York runners in there and an international stablemate, and he did it with ease. The final 2 quarters in the 1.5 Joe Hirsch Turf Classic, 23.81 for the 5th quarter, and the 6th and final quarter of the 1.5 race, 23.22. He accelerated through the wire after getting away with easy early fractions under Frankie Dettori. The perfect prep race that you want to see, not overly exerted and looking as dominant as ever. He is going to be a tough out in the Breeders' Cup Turf, certainly tougher than any of the American performers who might match up with him. Right now, Rebels Romance is 9-2 according to oddschecker.com in the Breeders' Cup Turf. Europeans, Mini Hawk at 5-2 and Ombudsman at 4-1. The international runners slightly favored over the 9-2 proposition on Rebels Romance. Depends who comes over from Europe, and it'll be interesting to see how many Europeans want to take him on after winning 2 Breeders' Cup Turfs in the last 3 years and knowing his affinity for American racing, his prep win as dominant as it was. Will that keep some Europeans away from the Breeders' Cup Turf and coming over this year? There'll probably be 1 or 2 who say it's not worth the trip now, but at 7 years old, Rebels Romance looks like he still has it. And he's going to be an awfully tough horse to beat in the Breeders' Cup Turf. Rebels Romance, third topic here this week. He wants more, and more. Fourth topic this week, as we switch to the Distaff division, it's time for the ladies to take their spin. It's Spinster Weekend Sunday at Keeneland, the last really major of 11 stakes races offered during Fall Stars Weekend at Keeneland this Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And the Spinster Stakes, of course, is going to feature Torpedo Anna, defending champion in last year's Breeders' Cup Distaff, one of the heaviest favorites, in fact, the second heaviest favorite in history to win a Breeders' Cup race last year. She could go off at very short odds again if she's successful in the Spinster Stakes and runs her streak into this year's Breeders' Cup Distaff. We'll see her this Sunday in action at Keeneland. Expected field right now. They draw it, I believe, Wednesday or Tuesday. They will draw later today for Sunday, but expected in the field, Nitrogen, the winner of the Alabama, the 3-year-old filly for trainer Mark Cassie. Scylla, a filly who has been a sprinter in recent starts, 6 sprints in a row for Scylla. She may stretch out and take on Torpedo Anna for trainer Bill Mott in the Spinster Stakes. Leslie's Rose, winner of the Shoe V. Jin for Brendan Walsh, and maybe Alpine Princess for Brendan Cox, listed among the possibles. Again, that field will be firmed up later today on Tuesday. Be sure to check out the official entries for the Spinster Stakes coming up on Sunday. Now, we talked last week about the 3-year-old fillies not really stepping up at all to give Torpedo Anna much of a challenge. Who amongst the older fillies and mares might be able to do so in the Breeders' Cup Distaff? We had a couple big races, a trio of them last weekend, and you expect somebody to kind of raise their hoof and say, I'll take on the champ. We had the Zenyatta Stakes on the West Coast. We had the Belle Dame in New York. And, of course, we had the Delaware Handicap in the first state. And Delaware Handicap wasn't the kind of race that it has been in past years, not the quality of competition there. Regaled won it for Whit Beckman, but now just 4 for 17 lifetime. And this is the filly who really just didn't make much of a dent other than a couple grade 3 placings prior to the Delaware Handicap. Can't expect her to be a big threat in the Breeders' Cup Distaff division. Gunsong won the Belle Dame over Randomize, who is just right now a horse who just needs to get away with an easy lead, and she just doesn't have the form she once had. Gunsong won the Belle Dame Stakes, now 5 for 16 lifetime. And again, she was a very good grade 2 type, but not a grade 1 star. And she only beat 3 rivals in the Belle Dame. So I don't think you're looking at a horse like Gunsong who steps up and takes on successfully Torpedo Anna. But there is one, and she's on the West Coast. Cavalieri made her first start since back in the Beholder Mile in March. She upped her record to 5 for 5 in winning the Zenyatta Stakes in Southern California as part of that huge weekend we talked about for trainer Bob Baffert.
And they're off, and Cavalieri Dwelt was running right into the air when the gate opened, and a very unfortunate start for the favorite. A quarter of a mile to go, and it's Ricci on the inside, and Cavalieri running an enormous race. Ricci, Cavalieri at the top of the stretch, and Cavalieri puts her head in front. Ricci has to respond. 3 back to Howen in third. There's 1 furlong left, and Cavalieri is getting the upper hand on Ricci, who's trying so hard, a half length back in second. Cavalieri, an enormous win in the Zenyatta, punches a first-class ticket to the Breeders' Cup Distaff. Ricci was second. Howen finished third.
Let you go through the gallop out there with Cavalieri, because when you look at the Zenyatta Stakes, I wasn't impressed with the come home times there. They went slow the first half and they didn't finish up with big time fractions. So I think this win might be a little bit false in terms of being overly excited about it. Frank Miramati, the track announcer, certainly emphasized the difficulty at the start for Cavalieri and how she was game to win this race, but she wasn't dominant in the performance that would make you think that she could beat Torpedo Anna off of that. She will have some home field advantage at Del Mar, staying on the West Coast, but we've already seen Torpedo Anna successfully navigate the trip to Del Mar and win the Breeders' Cup Distaff last year over that same racetrack. So I don't know if there's some major advantage to the home field other than limited travel, easier travel for sure. But a good performance from Cavalieri. She's 5 for 5 lifetime here at the end of her 4-year-old season. She hasn't run very much. She certainly doesn't have a lot of tread off the tires, but I didn't like the way that they came home in that race time-wise, and I thought that they could have been a bit more impressive after the slow early fractions. So Ricci kind of gave it up, I think, more so than Cavalieri just absolutely took it in there. Cavalieri is going to be second choice, I think, pretty clearly when we look at the Breeders' Cup Distaff, unless we get an upset in the Spinster Stakes where you could see somewhere like a horse like Nitrogen, the 3-year-old filly. She would be the one if she runs a bang-up race and upsets Torpedo Anna, that maybe that changes in terms of what the odds look like for the Breeders' Cup Distaff. But right now, Torpedo Anna 3-1 in the international markets, 5-1 on the second choice, Cavalieri, and then a gap back third choice on odds checker right now is the Alabama winner in the 3-year-old filly Nitrogen. Again, Nitrogen's going to get her chance on Sunday going head-to-head with Torpedo Anna. If you really like Nitrogen, you kind of want her to run second in the race at Keeneland. Otherwise, your price obviously is going to take a big dip if you like her in the Breeders' Cup Distaff. But right now, Torpedo Anna, a clear-cut divisional leader. I didn't see enough in the Delaware Handicap, the Belle Dame, or even a pretty good Zenyatta, but not a great Zenyatta performance by Cavalieri to unseat the Queen right now. It looks like Torpedo Anna's division to have and to lose at this point, with about 4 weeks before the Breeders' Cup. Our fifth and final topic each week here on the podcast is our Stars of Tomorrow. Give an honorable mention here to Woodstock, a 2-year-old filly who won the E.L. Gaylord Memorial at Remington Park for Mike Maker. She's now 2 for 2 on the dirt and ran faster than the same-day Clever Trevor Stakes. She's a daughter of Yalpon and probably sprints. Honorable mention this week to Woodstock for Mike Maker. But the Star of Tomorrow from last week is Counting Stars, 2-year-old filly at Churchill Downs last Friday for Mark Cassie. Really impressive debut maiden special weight winner.
Goes to the outside, theoretical angles toward the rail, on floor, switched outside as well. They're off the turn. Fashion Designer comes off the turn, grabs a 2-length lead. Counting Stars shakes loose from the traffic and pounces at the 8th pole. Counting Stars up for the lead into the final 16th and opens up to the wire. Counting Stars, good-looking effort.
So Counting Stars, our 2-year-old Star of Tomorrow. Again, Mark Cassie trains for West Point Thoroughbreds by Honor AP, a really talented horse from one of the first crops of Honor AP. Honor AP in that 2020 season when Authentic won through the Triple Crown. I really thought that Honor AP was going to be one of the stars of that Triple Crown series. And I think if the Kentucky Derby been run in the spring that year, the way he was coming out of the races at Santa Anita in the spring, I think he could have been a Kentucky Derby winner. Of course, you had, Tis the Law also was a sharp performer that you could have made that same argument for during that time of year. But Honor AP, I think, is going to be a very good sire. This is one of his first fillies to race in Counting Stars, and $150,000 2-year-old buy at the Ocala sale in the spring. Counting Stars, one to keep an eye on in our Star of Tomorrow. Let's review the 5 topics this week on It's Official. We started off with this week's Goosebump Award. Imagination, back from a January layoff, just in a hand ride, sprinting, went by champion sprinter Straight No Chaser to win at Santa Anita for trainer Bob Baffert. The Derby winners both had some shine on them from the past 2 years over the past week. Mystic Dan, the 2024 Kentucky Derby winner, won the Lucas Classic with a final 3 furlongs in a sharp 37-1. He's headed towards the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. And then this year's Kentucky Derby winner, Sovereignty, had his form flattered once again when his 10-length Travers runner-up came back on Sunday, Bracket Buster, to win the Oklahoma Derby. Horses behind Sovereignty have now run 1-2 in the Pennsylvania Derby and won the Oklahoma Derby in recent weeks, and just underscore the form of the Breeders' Cup Classic favorite. Rebels Romance wants more. In fact, he wants 3 of those Breeders' Cup Turf titles. He won it in 2022. He won it in 2024. And his win in the Joe Hurst Turf Classic was as impressive as he's run here in the States. A really, really handy front-running win where he looked like he was just having fun. He is going to be a tough out in the Breeders' Cup Turf, that being Rebels Romance. The Distaffers get to go and take their spin this weekend in the Spinster at Keeneland on Sunday, part of Fall Stars weekend, headlined by Torpedo Anna and the 3-year-old filly Nitrogen. Field officially draws for the Spinster later today on Tuesday. We also took a look back at Cavaliere's victory in the Senata Stakes at Santa Anita and discussed the Beldame and the Delaware Handicap, underwhelming in terms of impact they could have on the Breeders' Cup Distaff. In our stars of tomorrow, honorable mention to Woodstock from Mike Maker and Counting Stars, the 2-year-old filly for trainer Mark Cassie, good-looking daughter of Hunter AP, winning her career debut last Friday at Churchill Downs. Those 5 topics are now official because Jeff Siegel and I say so, and that's how we play the game here on the podcast. I'll be back in 7 days' time next week with 5 more topics on the board as we get closer and closer to the Breeders' Cup. Now just 4 weeks away from the championships at Del Mar. Be sure to join me on Friday as we get back into some handicapping of these weekend stakes races. Fall Stars weekend at Keeneland. Certainly check that out this Friday as we handicap the races for not only Keeneland, but Santa Anita and Belmont at Aqueduct when I'm joined on the podcast by guest handicapper Scott Shapiro. We'll have that for you on Friday. One other programming note, if you enjoyed the podcast and my commentary, Keeneland, I have the Keeneland Look Ahead podcast the night before each day's racing of the Keeneland meet. So 17 days of the Keeneland Fall meet. We'll have 17 Keeneland Look Ahead preview podcasts, 8:30 Eastern, the night before the next day's racing. So with Friday's opening day at Keeneland, they'll debut on Thursday. Follow me on Twitter at HorsePlayerNow and on YouTube at HorsePlayerNow to check out those Keeneland Look Ahead podcasts. We'll have those for you. Again, 8:30 Eastern beginning this Thursday night for the opening day Friday card. On behalf of everybody with First Bet and Express Bet, send out our best wishes and our love to our partner, Jeff Siegel. And we want to wish everybody a great week, and we'll be back with you on Friday. Take care, everybody.